Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the London session recap for Euro Dollar on Tuesday, the 23rd of August 2022. So we have had, as we've obviously been expecting, price has broken the week daily swing low, and we got a break and closure below it yesterday on Monday to essentially give us our new swing range. So that's why we have now moved the previous swing high down to around here, because obviously after a break of structure we now have a new swing range, and we look back for where was the highest point that took out this low after it was printed to where it was broken. This is obviously it, right? So this becomes our new swing range that we are currently within. So we can almost zoom in a little bit, and this will basically be the new range we are working with. Now, after a break of structure, what do we expect? We expect a swing pullback, but obviously that doesn't always have to happen straight away. Like we saw with the previous swing range, price can fall for a number of days, potentially even a week, potentially longer. And from an intraday perspective, that is a ton of opportunity that we can potentially be following the order flow on those timeframes. But whilst always being aware in the back of our mind, right, that swing pullback can kick in at any moment. So we need to be a bit more aggressive with our management if we're following this bearish order flow, because it's very hard to know how far the price is likely to fall. Obviously, we can look left and try and find previous demand zones and things like that, and obviously we'll get signals from the market whenever we get a bullish daily change of character, which will very often be structure shifting on the 4 hour and the M15. They're going to be the signs of when we can start to take that swing pullback a bit more seriously. But when we get that initial break, especially in this type of current market environment, like if we zoom out, you can just see how aggressively bearish it is. That's when we can still look to continue to short it, right? Cool. So for our chart, just bring it back to where we actually are. Not that far, to around here. We had that break as well. So now we have the new 4 hour swing high, which I believe is in the same place as the daily chart. Okay. So this being our next current swing range. Basically kind of the exact same thing as what I just said in the daily chart. We have had that break, so we can expect that 4 hour swing pullback to kick in. But yeah, with the current market environment, with kind of how strong momentum is, the fact that there's no sort of really recent demand zones to the left for price to react off, price can fall for quite some time. So I'm happy to keep kind of following that momentum until we potentially start to see that structure shift. So this wouldn't be that high yet, but what are some of the signs? Just thinking about one time frame at a time, as I wrote here in the pre-session analysis annotation, that we can look for structure to signal when things may be pulling back. Well, when we have the fractal structure, which is basically just when we look at candlestick pullbacks, if we get that bullish change of character here, that will simply just signal an internal pullback, right? It's only when we get like a true IBOS that's when we have a much bigger signal that we're going to get that 4 hour swing pullback. So what I mean by that is, like, we could get a bit of a decent pullback like this, right? Not quite a swing pullback, but more of an internal pullback. Then we move down, then we have like one candle or two candles pull back, right? Then it breaks to the downside. So then if price breaks here to the upside, that will be our bullish change of character. But at that moment, all I'm expecting is just an internal pullback to this strong internal high. It would only be once we get a break of that internal high, right, where we get kind of clear internal structure, that breaks to the upside. Okay, now I'm expecting that larger swing pullback, okay? And that's why we use CHOC as a signal for an internal pullback, and we use the IBOS as a signal for the swing pullback. And a very, very good example of that is where we had in the last break of structure, right? The last big daily and 4 hour swing boss we had back over here, back in the middle of July. Again, I don't know if we're going to see a similar price action, who knows? But we obviously sold off quite aggressively. And the first 4 hour bullish change of character, let's just have a look. Go up, then we came down, and came up, came down, came up, came down, came up, came down. I think was there one there? So this low is 339, that low is 349, yeah, which means we pull back. So that here would have been a bullish CHOC, okay? So at that moment when we get that, yes, it's a bullish signal, but the expectation is only we're going to get an internal pullback of this leg here, because this was the 4 hour internal high. So that's all I would expect at that moment. And that's why 4 hour bullish CHOC can give you a few false signals before the real move. So then obviously we then continue that movement there. We broke that fractal low to then give us another bullish CHOC here. But again, at that point, all I'd be thinking is an internal pullback of this leg, which is where we've got a bit of a deeper pullback, right? And mitigated these buy to sell wick supply in the EQ of that internal leg, right? And then we continued to roll over. So that's why CHOC, all the CHOC signals is an internal pullback. Then we broke and closed below that low. So then we had another IBOS. I didn't count this as enough of a swing pullback relative to the recent price action. Okay, if we zoom out, That was a swing pullback, and this for me was just internal structure, right? But then when we got that bullish IBOS and we broke and closed above the internal high, now we have true confirmation that we're getting that larger swing pullback, right? And that's when we then saw that internal structure stay bullish to facilitate that swing pullback of the swing leg, right? And then so on and so forth. So that's basically what we can, that framework we're going to apply to this piece of price action here. So let's jump down to the M15 and we'll come back to the 4-hour chart at the end. Just going to bring it round to around where pre sort of Frankfurt was, sort of about 5:30, 6:45. So we started to sell off kind of before Frankfurt even happened. Now, some of you may still have your M15 swing high all the way up here because since we've had that break of structure, all of these aren't really that big of the pullbacks, relative to like obviously this sort of price action, right? They're all kind of quite small, and that's absolutely fine. Like I get it, it makes sense. But the reason why I chose to kind of zoom in a little bit and focus on these sort of more smaller swings is just because otherwise, like it just doesn't make sense to me to have a massive swing range here. Yes, you can still interpret it and read it as swing structure, but I just wanted to keep things a little bit more simple, especially if we start to develop quite a complex pullback. I don't want to have to try and be explaining the internal of the internal of the internal if we start to get those complex ranges. So, I'm happy to kind of just zoom in and look at these recent price action, as swing structures. So if, for instance, we get like an M15 bullish boss and the M15 swing structure switches bullish, I'm not suddenly, thinking, okay, this M15 swing trend is going to last a long time, or suddenly thinking, right, if we get that, this low is going to be super high probability because overall the bigger picture is still heavily bearish, right? So if we did get that bullish boss, I'd probably just be thinking, well, we're coming up into these levels more like here, right? And then I'd be expecting it to turn anyway. So, you kind of have to take that or, know how to interpret it with the, rest of your multi-time frame analysis there. But anyway, let's keep things nice and simple. We have this M15 swing boss, and now we have the new M15 swing range. This becomes our strong swing high, also sub liquidity, which is nice. And then if we kind of follow along, this would be the real only kind of M15 POI that we have to work with. Not ideal because there is no structural liquidity in the leg, right? There's no pullback there, so there's no inducement for this POI. And this POI didn't sweep any liquidity on this time frame. So really not ideal. Ideally, we want to see like price come back and at least form some nice inducement, some nice equal highs there. Or we get a structural high before it where this high breaks the low and then price comes in, and that's some decent inducement there that can really increase the probability of these POIs playing out. So yeah, when it looks like this, not really a lot to work with and kind of just have to be a little bit patient. If price just wants to keep tanking without pulling back, okay, so be it. But like I don't want to chase the M1 down here after we've had that break of structure because we're expecting some form of pullback, right? If we look at the M1 here, right, you can look to trade these and stuff, but for me, it's just, super low probability and not something I want to look to get involved with. So let's just play this forward a little bit, kind of to around session open. I don't think much happened. Kind of initially, it's kind of just chopping around. That's why I'm not looking to get involved. Just let it do its thing. Let it form some clearer structure. Okay, so now we get like this M1 boss, okay, which essentially we're looking at M15. It's what we call now a fractal pullback, right? What we use for change of character, where we're looking at that candlestick structure. It's what we now refer to as fractal structure, okay, where essentially you can see this candle here obviously failed to break the prior candle's low, so we got that fractal pullback, and now we have a continuation of that move. Now, when this low initially broke, the M15 didn't quite look like this because we didn't have a candle closure, but how it looked on the M1 was like this. Okay, so now we have just a little bit more structure to work with. What I wanted to essentially do was just capture a quick move, like essentially just capturing that sort of M15 fractal continuation, which essentially is sort of your M5 continuation, your M1 swing continuation. And I'm just looking for a quick move, pretty much just targeting this low, seeing if I can get like a quick 5R move, because what I'm expecting, right, after we had, again, zoom out, the break of that M15 low, we've had that movement, I'm expecting that pullback to kick in at any moment. So I'm just looking for kind of just trying to capture that momentum at session open and just trying to follow, because everything is just heavily bearish. I'm just looking for a quick move. Okay, I don't view this as super high probable trading, but it was something I was happy to set a limit on in this instance. So we had a sweep of liquidity. Right, you can see where price caused that M1 shock there, and then you have kind of two POIs you can look at. You can look at the extreme here, which swept, and then you've also got the flip. Okay, so we have this demand level here in the M1, Now, why is this valid demand? It's valid demand because, excuse me, 1 second. Obviously, the next candle closes above its high, and it caused a break of structure, right? It caused a break of this high. So then when price comes back down into the demand, what do we expect? We expect price to react from it and put in a higher high. It clearly fails to do so and pushes down. So it's just a bullish candle. It's not the best. Ideally, you want to see like the next candle pull back up and then break the low, but it's still a flip nonetheless. It's just not the best, right? So that's kind of your two POIs. But yeah, for me, I wasn't convinced by the flip. It didn't have any inducement in the leg, right? There's no structural liquidity here. And obviously it didn't sweep any liquidity. So for me, this wasn't that high probability, considering the overall trade idea isn't that high probable. So I ignored that and I set my limit on the extreme with a 2 pip stop. I'm basically just looking to get 5R. Now it wasn't ideal because I'll show you as price moves forward, starts to pull back. Really kind of want 5R to be at the low. That's kind of another reason why I wasn't really happy with taking this trade, but I left the limit order on anyway. And as we can see, as we price forward a little bit, it ends up rejecting the flip and then continuing down, built some equals, and then took out those lows. So then when we broke the low of where the pullback initiated from, that's when I then cancelled my order, because price would have to obviously break structure to come back up to me and tag me in. And yeah, I want to be captured in on this pullback, and I'm trying to capture that move, and that's basically already played out. So this now becomes null and void. I'm no longer interested in taking this personally. So once we've got then the closure of this M15 candle, that technically does give us this M15 POI here, okay, which you could look to trade from to continuation, but we were coming into high impact news from about 8 a.m. onwards, a couple of PMIs coming out. So yeah, I just wasn't really that interested in looking to trade from this until that news had played out. So I'll play this forward a bit to around sort of 8 a.m. I believe the news was 8:15. Sorry, it was 8:15. Yeah. 8:15 and 8:30, I think. So we were coming up into this POI. It's like if there wasn't any news, right, and let's just imagine what I'd be looking for. At this point, you could either one, leave that limit I had on this level here, because you're essentially playing the extreme of this. I'll just show you here. Bring it back a little bit. Like, that's what I'm saying. So imagine we're in a situation in which there is no high impact news. We have this M15. At the time, it was an unmitigated POI, right, that caused a fractal break. Yes, you can look for this continuation of the move. And again, I'm happy to take that in this market environment, but I'm just looking for a quick move and at most like targeting this low, and I want to be out. It's like quick scalping. It's not super high probability, because at any moment, we're going to get that pullback after we've had that break of structure here, right? Even if you don't have this as your swing low, but it was just an internal low, we still have to expect some deeper pullback to facilitate the pullback of this leg, right? So if you're just getting a little pause like that and a movement back in, that's where you want to be quick with your targets if you're going to do that. But I only kind of really take these kind of moves from the POIs like this, when obviously market is super impulsive and there's a lot of momentum, right? But it's not super high probability trading is the point I'm trying to make. So yeah, in this instance, this could be where I would potentially consider taking a risk entry if there were no news, or you can wait for obviously price to come back in and give us our textbook standard entry model where we get the confirmation entry there. But yeah, there was news, so basically I wasn't even looking at price at this moment once this was playing out, and then it came up into that level, and then yeah, again, more high impact news, so not a level I want to be looking to trade, and then we break structure to the upside. Now, whilst that was all happening, there was actually a bullish chock, which I'll talk through because it's a bit of a harder one to see on the M15. But essentially, obviously, if price from here sells off first and breaks this low, this fractal low, this then becomes the high, right? And then obviously if price comes back up in the same candle and takes it out, then you have a bullish chock, which I think is exactly what happened in this scenario, where price takes the low first and then it took the high. Did it? Let me just double check the M1 at that point. I believe it took, it's hard to tell actually in this instance. I'd have to check on like the 30 seconds. Yeah, so you can see how the low was broken first. Price broke the low over here. Right, so this was off the M15 fractal low. So price comes down, takes the low, which then at that moment it breaks the low. This becomes the fractal high, the M15 fractal high, and then it takes the high. So there was actually a bullish M15 change of character here. Okay, so we go back to the M15. There's your bullish chock, right? But again, No trading decisions need to be made here because there's just high impact news. Just wait for price to sort itself out. Then it shoots up with the news. Okay, and this is why we don't trade high impact news, because it's pretty low probability to leave orders on, right? And then we move up. So at this point, we've had a bullish change of character. We're pulling back. We're up here. Do I want to look for longs? No, because we're trading right into a strong high. Regardless of whether it's swing or internal, this should still be a strong high for you because it led to that break and we just pulled back up into this level. There's no supply when we look to the left to trade from. So like from an M15 perspective, you almost, you want it to if you get a pullback, a break of that high, and then a break of that low, then at least you've got a bearish chock there, and then you have some M15 supply to work with or something. Basically, you need a lot more development. There's nothing here. Like you could wait for price to come down into this level and then potentially look for longs to anticipate the break of that high, but I wouldn't view that as high probability because at that moment, the M15 strong high is held and you're trying to buy from a weak low. So yeah, I'm just chilling. I'm waiting for this to either break out to the upside. Okay, now we have a new M15 swing range, and then you can look to trade this to the upside and start to target a bit of that 4-hour internal pullback potentially up to this level. But there's nothing going on here. Like if we look at the M1, imagine even potentially you may want to think, okay, there's no unmitigated M15 supply to the left, but it's right at the strong swing high. So maybe, like if we bring price back to here, maybe if on the M1 like price came up and it pulled back a bit and then it gave us an M1 shock, okay, maybe you want to trade that. There's no M15, like I said, no M15 unmitigated supply, but maybe you're just really happy to trade from the strong structural level and the M1 switches character, so then you want to take this, but like none of that happens. It's all just bullish on the M1. There's just nothing to work with, right? You see it comes all the way up and it's coming all the way down, so there's nothing to short here. There's no valid supply. Do I want to buy from this demand? No, for the reasons I explained, right? We've come into the M15 strong high. Why would I be buying from here? It makes no sense for me to do that. It's not high probability enough at all. So just sit on my hands and there's nothing to do, and price is just ranging. And this is why you don't want to be buying from here, right? Because the M15 swing structure is still bearish. All we've had is a bullish chock. That's it. And it just chocked bullish to do what? To facilitate the pullback into this strong level. So yeah. Just let me see. Yeah, there's just nothing here that meets my plan at all. Now we have had a chock and then one chock, so at least you have some more bearish confidence, but there's just nothing clean here. Where you're going to trade from, really. That makes sense. Nothing on the M15 anyway, so I personally would be waiting for a break of this low to at least form some new structure. All right, because we are trading within this range. Obviously, we've got demand here as well, so this is valid demand, so I don't really want to short through that. Do I want to buy from here? Personally, no, because you're trading from a weak swing low after prices pull back up to the high. Could this play out? Yes, of course. Anything can play out. It's just, do I want to trade it? No, it's not high probability enough for me, so that's not a move. I'd rather wait for that move, wait for structures to shift. Okay, now we have this new range. This then becomes your strong low, right? And now you have strong structure to work with, right? We want to be buying from structure. We want to be buying from strong structure and targeting weak structure. In this instance, you'd be buying from weak structure after the pullback's already happened. So, this is not high probability enough for me to want to consider trading. So yeah, hopefully that will make sense. In terms of forecast for New York, yeah, this is looking like crap, to be honest with you. There's nothing here. I'd be waiting for a break of either the high or the low at this point to form new structure. So like I said, continuation of that movement, and then we can look for price to pull back in, but always being aware we have had that 4-hour break of structure, so at any point we could be getting those deeper pullbacks. Quick comment on the 4H. Actually, we did technically have a bullish 4-hour chock, but this is where you guys have to use some nuance of when to pay attention to it and when not, right? So that was your 4-hour chock there. Kind of show you as to why, because that was the low, the fractal low. So price pulled back, then we broke that low, and then in the same candle we then came up and took the inside bar high. So yes, that is technically a bullish chock. Am I paying attention to that? No, right? You obviously want to at least see price break out this high and then come back in and then okay, right? So yes, it's a 4-hour chock. Do I care about it? No. Right, the M15, that's the signal you're going to be looking at in this moment. You want to see price breaking that high before thinking kind of about those bullish movements. Yeah, in this instance, really. So I don't think there's anything else I wanted to add. Quite a reasonably simple session, to be honest with you. Look for that low probability sort of continuation scalp from within here. Didn't get tagged in, cancelled the order straight away when I didn't get in on the M1 pull back into that level, and then news kind of just did its thing, and yeah, just waiting for a lot more development at this point, and just have to exercise, a little bit of patience. All right, guys, cheers.